Hi, everyone, and welcome back. And I'm with John Plasse.
Hey, good morning, Tom.
Supervisor, good to see you.
Good to see you,
well,
too.
You heard my news story.
I did.
And I'm sure it was quite complicated.
Plenty of acronyms, right?
Oh, my gosh. But it is a complicated subject. I mean, maybe the subject isn't very complicated, but the history of it is quite complicated.
It is.
And it gets cloudy a little bit more. But why don't you tell us, try to roll back some of the clouds.
Well, I'll give it a try, Tom. This all goes back to back in the 2008 time frame when the Forest Service was originally sued by a gal named Karen Schambach and others to have to create a travel management plan that designated which trails and roads in the forest were allowed to be used by off-highway vehicles and which trails and roads were not allowed to be used. So they conducted the travel management plan. At that time, in the Eldorado National Forest, the Forest Service closed almost 1,700 miles of roads, that many of which were on their maps. They, in many instances, had Forest Service identification numbers, but they weren't in the Forest Service's actual inventory of roads, and therefore the Forest Service took the stance, they're not in our inventory, they don't exist, we're throwing away all the old maps. We'll create some new maps that just show our inventoried routes, and then we'll go through this travel management plan to ascertain which of those routes will remain accessible to off-highway vehicles. So that was step one, a loss of almost 1,700 miles of roads. Many of them lower country, but some up in the high country as well. Some old roads that I'm sure my great-grandfather probably had something to do with the original construction of. So fast forward now to 2009, once the travel management plan was done, Karen Schambach, Center for Biological Diversity, and other environmental groups filed a new lawsuit saying that when the Forest Service designated certain routes as accessible to off-highway vehicles, they didn't follow their own management plan, forest plan, that says what level of environmental study has to be done in meadow areas for hydrological effects. And any trail or road that was crossing what they described as a meadow area was under contention. So they filed a lawsuit on that basis.
Being up in the forest, and going up there myself, that a lot of places are very treed, and then they'll come on out to an area, there's a meadow, and then go back into a treed area, and maybe the road would go through that. So that was the kind of thing we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the meadows were not
small.
what a lot of people would picture as some expansive, lush green meadow, but areas where grass grows.
Probably not the size of plazas, but still, a
little small grassy
just a little
area.
Small area where you would travel through.
But if the trail happened to go through that area, the lawsuit and the judge that ruled on the lawsuit said that the Forest Service has to close those trails. This is these 42 travel routes we're talking about here.
Right.
They have to close those until they complete this level of hydrologic environmental study before they can in fact designate those open to wheeled vehicle travel.
Okay, now we have 30 seconds left, and we're going to come back with another, right after this break, and we'll continue on. But we find ourselves now with Supervisor Hardy of the Forest Service has seems like possibly another plan that she would like to implement. And we'll talk about that when we come back with Supervisor John Plasse on TSPN's News for Today. You're watching Amador County's #1 news and sports leader, TSPN. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back. And I'm once again with Supervisor John Plasse. And, John, we left off with talking about the new Eldorado Forest Supervisor, Kathleen Hardy. And why don't you tell me what you know about Kathleen?
Well, Kathleen, I believe, has been on the job for close to a year. No, Kathy, she seems to be a very casual person. I appreciate that quality. She's been on the job for, I believe, about a year now. And I am just treating my relationship with her and other Forest Service personnel like I've discovered I have to, and that's sort of give them the benefit of the doubt, give them the opportunity to hopefully demonstrate that they understand that the Forest Service is there to manage our public lands, and not try to create de facto wilderness areas on all public lands, and give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they understand that distinction, and work with those of us that use or like to enjoy our public lands in a variety of ways, and see to it that some of the plans and acts and implementation measures of the past don't end up closing our public lands to all of us.
Okay, so what route do you think the Secretary is following right now?
Well, new Forest Supervisor Kathy Hardy has proposed action, and I was discovered recently that she has the independent authority to amend the forest plan that was drafted some time ago, and she is proposing to do just that with regards to this lawsuit, and do things that help to get these routes reopened in a legal fashion, but reopened in as short a time possible. And so she has proposed, I think 5 different actions, 2 of which amend the forest plan, and other actions are taking a field survey of some of these routes that were declared to go through meadow areas and were therefore causing this, as they like to phrase it, irreparable environmental harm, and discovered that in many cases, I believe 9 of the routes did not cross meadows, so she wants to reopen those for public motorized access.
Okay.
And 12 of the routes that the field surveys determined that the meadows didn't meet the standard and guidelines, as they refer to in their forest plan. So it seems that she is making proposed actions that help address the fact that the motorized public has a right to access their public lands just as much as the non-motorized public, and it's refreshing. I hope that we can all get out. I know you talked about the public comment period that will be held at the Jackson Civic Center on the October 29th between 3 and 8 p.m. I hope as many people can come there and let Kathy Hardy know that they appreciate her actions and her direction.
Some people that have been to these I'm certain it's not a scoping session, but it's some kind of thing like that, to where you're giving comments, and it seems like lately they might not be writing comments or taking them down with their own staff. So is it advised that people, if they have comments, to write them out as well, to hand them over or mail them in?
Yeah, I think if you want your comments to be formally recognized in this proposed action that Kathy Hardy is bringing forward, you probably should have them written down and either present them to her in person that day, but also see to it that they get emailed or sent in before the deadline. I think largely these public open houses that she's having, I think there's one in Markleyville and one in Placerville and the one in Jackson on the 29th, are largely also an opportunity for the public to get to meet Kathy Hardy and just talk one-on-one with her, given the opportunity, and let her know, how much we value our public lands and our access to those public lands.
Okay, now, I don't want to put you on the hot seat or anything, or mess
I'm there all the time,
your relationship. But was the Board of Supervisors noticed in a way that you feel that it seemed like possibly the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Other service, I can't think
Bureau
of it right
of Land
now.
Management.
Yeah, Bureau of Land Management isn't necessarily giving the local authorities or local politicians the emails that one might think should be sent to you directly.
We did have an early meeting with Kathy Hardy and Rick Hobson and 2 others from the Forest Service regarding her proposed actions. They weren't as specific as the email that you showed me here, as far as the definition of which routes were going to be designated and which she was going to amend the forest plan. But in general, we had a meeting with them early, but I learned about this open house in the Jackson Civic Center because Sue Slivick sent me an email saying, hey, here's a press release that was released in Placerville that got to us, but no advance notice of it by our Forest Service was sent to local government directly. And I think that's a little bit contrary to what the direction of open communication between federal, state, and local government and the MOUs that have recently been signed by the Forest Service and BLM with RCRC and also in some instances with local governments. Seems a little contrary to that.
Hopefully,
effort.
bringing them to light might change the behavior pattern that seems to be settling in to where it seems like your position as a representative of Amador County
Absolutely.
isn't taken to in a proper role to me in a way of responding to you, getting you the word probably before or at least the same time that things are released to other people.
I think that's primarily what we're asking for, Tom, is to be considered on an equal basis as a government-to-government relationship, so that things that are proposed as management decisions within the lands within Amador County, that Amador County's elected officials have an opportunity to comment and discuss our preferences early and often in the process.
Okay, I'm going to bring one more thing up. I'm saying this, you're not, but here in the West, we seem to have these problems, and a lot of people maybe in the East Coast or in areas, certainly the first 13 states, and then later I think probably up to the banks of the Ohio and other places like that, they don't have federal lands that are being managed for them, and that the states have the lands, things like that, other than monuments and parks and things like that. So I'm not quite sure if the whole U.S. Understands the plight that the West is in.
I would agree with you, Tom. I don't see nearly as much quote-unquote public lands on the eastern side as on the western and midwestern
There isn't
side
any.
of the
That's why
United
they
States.
carved out the Washington, D.C.
Well, back then they were actually honoring the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, I believe, that says the federal government shall own no lands except for post offices and military installations.
Okay.
Seem to have lost that here on the
Okay.
West. Well, hopefully these lawsuits, I hope our new
Let's-
administration addresses the Equal Access to Justice Act, because it's nothing but a financial incentive for these environmental organizations to sue. They get paid for doing so. When they win on one small technical point, they're compensated handsomely by the federal agencies that they sue on these environmental actions.
Okay, John, once again, nice talking with
Thanks,
you here
Tom.
on TSPN's News, and stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this break. You're watching Amador County's #1 news and sports leader, TSPN.